China Watch Radio is brought to you in part by Sushi Market Sprouts on 7th in Santa Cruz and Kaito in the Capitola Mall Food Court. Treat yourself to the finest Japanese cuisine you'll find anywhere with fresh sushi to go and delicious ramen dinners. Sushi Market Sprouts and Kaito. Yum!
好，同学们，我们在轰轰烈烈的站起来，站起来。Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Who Owns Taiwan edition of the China Watch Radio Show. Hey, today we have back in the saddle again, Amy Howe. I'm so excited to have Amy back. It's a great pleasure to have her. On the boards in the control room, we have Susan Simon, without whom we couldn't do anything. On the controls here in broadcast studio, we have Bill Graff.
Hello.
And we have David Welch standing tall, ready to rip and roar here.
Good afternoon, everybody.
So we're going to have a great show today, folks. As evidenced by the recent visit of U.S. House Representative Speaker Nancy Pelosi, there seems to be a difference of opinion as to who owns Taiwan.
Isn't there, though?
The People's Republic of China insists that it owns Taiwan, but the Republic of China says it owns Taiwan. And so today we pause to ask, who has the best claim to owning Taiwan? Well, before we head there, we're going to have a quick break, and we're going to talk about the news of the week. Let's see, we have Bill. What do you have for us today?
Well, there's a new virus in China.
Again? What's the name now?
Langya.
Good. A new virus. How exciting.
Wow.
David Welsh, what do you got?
Wolf's teeth, so what? What's Langya? Wolf teeth.
Yeah.
What is it?
Lang is a wolf.
Mm-hmm.
Ya is a tooth.
Long tooth.
Wolf.
That would explain the
wolf
shrews.
Tooth. Wow.
There's shrews involved in this virus.
There you go.
There you go.
Oh.
All right,
David.
David.
This week on deck, former National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster argued that Taiwan, quote, not an easy military problem for Beijing to solve.
There you go. And I'm going to pick up a story about how Taiwan has rejected the Chinese Communist Party's offer of peace. So, a lot of hot things on the plates today, and plus we have Amy Howe to make sure we're flying straight. And
we're all on it.
I just coming to practice Chinese because Mr. Olsen said I forgot how to speak in Chinese.
Billy Graff, start us off, please.
All right. As I mentioned, there is a new virus. It's called the Langya virus. It's has affected about 35 people in eastern China.
35 people.
35 people out of a country of like a billion. Billion and
1.4 billion.
Okay. But it's something they apparently haven't seen before. And so it's freaking out some people in China, particularly some scientists. They're tracking this new animal-derived virus. They're positive this one came from animals, not a lab somewhere.
From the
Langya sounds like they bite people, those animals, whatever.
Well,
wolf bite?
Eastern China, and it's been infected by almost four dozen people. It's called they've nicknamed it Lei V. Lei V, I guess, is easier for everybody to remember. And that comes from the type of virus it is. It's apparently a Henny paw virus. I don't know what that
it's
means.
Those big words, right?
And it was found in Shandong and Henan provinces.
Yeah, Shandong, everybody know Qingdao beer. So that's Shandong province.
Oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute. It's going to affect beer? No.
Qingdao beer?
Qingdao beer. Don't drink Qingdao beer.
Good beer.
Remember that.
Anyway.
So is this a coronavirus?
No.
Oh, it's not a coronavirus.
It's a, like I said, this is they're identifying this as a Hennepa virus. Mm-hmm. And I'm not...
Hennepa 22.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that...
It's no more COVID-19.
There
So
you go.
anyway, the discovery was highlighted in a letter written by researchers from China, Singapore, and Australia, and published in the New England Journal of Medicine this month. So this is
Fresh off the
Brand new.
fresh off the press and credible sources and reporting.
Okay.
Okay. Now, one of the researchers from the Duke Medical School in Singapore told China's state-run Global Times that the cases of this Lei V virus so far have not been fatal or even very serious. So there's no need to panic. Now, here's what you get when you get this. You get a cough, some fatigue, and a fever. And then some people also get aches and pains. And
Sounds like COVID.
funny, that's what I was
flu?
just
Yeah,
about
flu,
to
maybe.
say.
Yeah.
Like the flu.
Yeah. But as I know, last week they were locked down. The Sanyang, Hainan province, the island, totally locked down. They have about 80,000 people, tourists from Shanghai.
Right.
They just locked down over there, just finally released, and they all the way go to Hainan. They locked down over there. And was charged them lots of money every day, like 16,000 yuan a day. They had to pay for the food and lounging.
This
So
is at a
they
big
can't afford it. So they just have a proposal. They said they wanted to have a airplane. They rather pay whatever the amount, so the private plane, and chartered, so back to Shanghai.
Amy, this was at a resort, wasn't it?
Yes, a resort.
So
Yeah,
this was
I
on-
know very well because I bought this the condo over there in 2007. I sold everything out about 2015, and it's beautiful islands. The only island China have, Hainan Island.
Hainan, so
Yeah,
the big
Hainan.
island right
Big island,
at the
peninsula
top of
to the
Gulf of
mainland.
Tonkin.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. The only place to have a blue sky and the blue water. Yeah.
Nice.
But now it's half of it occupied by the Chinese Navy.
Interesting though, what you're reporting about how they're trying to control it, control the virus, the coronavirus. Speaking of the other virus, let me just finish up here. Scientists have found 27%. Here's how, in the animal kingdom, here's how it breaks down where they found the virus. They found 27% of it in shrews tested. They found 5% of it in dogs, 2% in goats, and some moles.
Mole?
Digging moles, So what they think is that it's these animals are all natural reservoirs for the virus. Now, I don't know what natural reservoirs means, but apparently this thing can exist in animal kingdoms fairly easily without, too much of a problem.
How they can test it and every
This is
animal.
called a zoonotic virus.
Wow.
And apparently zoonotic viruses are very common, and they are now beginning to attract more attention since the start of the COVID pandemic because, of course, the original
Right.
the original thought was that they originated in bats. We've now found out that that's not true, but that's so that's why we're watching this, and that's why there's so. This is, like I said, under 40 people, humans, in 2 provinces in one part of China. But they're watching it because it's something they haven't seen before.
And that they haven't seen it before would harken back to what they haven't seen before with COVID-19.
Yep.
What is this? This is a brand new bug. Where did it come from? Well, of course it came from a bowl of bat soup.
Yeah.
Now, the final thought on this is the United Nations had
WHO.
previously warned the world that we'll see more of these kinds of diseases with increased exploitation in wildlife and because of what they're referring to as climate change. They think the weather is bringing out some of this stuff.
But the
Okay.
question is how they always from animal to human. How that happen?
Well, look,
They eat those animals or what?
I recently, just to not get too personal on this, I recently discovered that I have to get rid of some critters in my house in the greenhouse of my house. I've got some critters.
I thought you said I can't sleep on your couch anymore.
Well, no. But the thing about it is, I can see where fleas, parasites,
Well, there
whatever.
you go. Fleas. Where did
Fleas.
the bubonic plague come from?
That's a good
Exactly.
aging.
That was a zootonic.
Yeah. So
thing.
I'm thinking, look, the Chinese are right to be worried about this. I think.
And I think we're right to be worried about what the Chinese are doing with those bugs,
With the
and those
shrews.
viruses,
Yeah.
and whatnot
Exactly.
too. So.
I think you're right.
Okay, my turn to pick it up. I'm going to talk a little bit right now about China's the effort to bring China together by the CCP. Now, after Pelosi's visit, of course, we all know that the Chinese the CCP turned the PLA, the People's Liberation Army and Navy, loose to raise heck in the Taiwan Strait. So they surrounded Taiwan, and they feigned an attack, an invasion, so everybody could see exactly how tough and rough and tumble they were.
And a live fire exercise, which was unusual.
Live fire exercises, boom,
And
boom,
they invaded.
bang, bang.
And they invaded both water space and airspace.
Yes,
That's right,
they
Billy, yeah.
invaded Taiwan's airspace and water space. That's correct. Now what they have done is that they've issued a special white paper proposing a one country, two systems that would bring Taiwan together with mainland China.
Wait.
One country, two systems.
Wait. Wasn't that Hong Kong?
That's worked
That's
well
right.
in the past.
Not too long ago. If
Not too long ago.
people
And
not
did they-
have
and if
Alzheimer, they
if I
still
remember correctly,
Yeah.
they reneged on that deal.
Yeah, say
Yes,
at least 50 years, right? But that's 23 years gone.
In fact, I'm going to pick up that point on our next hour.
Sure.
Yeah.
So here we go. China has issued its first national defense white paper on Taiwan in 2 decades. So they've been quiet about it, but now they're speaking up. The China State Council proposed a system in which Taiwan would reunite with mainland China under the government of the Chinese Communist Party, but would be allowed to keep its capitalist system.
Sound familiar?
Yeah.
One party, two system.
Yeah.
You believe that?
Well, there you go. I have a bridge to sell you, right? If you have. So Taiwan rejected this one country, two party systems, and the Taiwan president Tsai Ing-wen said China issued its white paper in a wishful thinking way, disregarding the reality of the cross-strait situation right now. So you're attacking us, and you're proposing that we get together with you. Also in a news conference, the Taiwan Foreign Ministry spokesperson said that only the Chinese, the people of Taiwan can determine their future, and claims that China was using Pelosi's visit to establish a new threat level to the people of China. So, of course, that refers to all of the drills and the live fire drills that have been going on. So, what China is saying that we will reunite with Taiwan under the Chinese Communist Party, but the Chinese people of Taiwan can have their own capitalist system. So, nowhere in the world could we find any evidence that would back the assertion that that would actually
Fool
happen.
me once, shame on me. Fool me twice. Right?
Yes, there you go.
Well, we have the example already of how they
shaped
reneged
that,
and
yeah.
it didn't work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Hong Kong.
sure. And so, what would you do if you were Taiwan?
Well, it depends if you're part of the Pan Green or the Pan Blue Party, which we'll get to in a little while.
There we go. Okay, David Welch, you're up.
Well, it was interesting. National Security Advisor and Lieutenant General H.R. McMaster last week was commenting that Taiwan may not be such an easy military problem for Beijing to solve. And, we've been reporting on this show for the last few months that, the island itself is just bristling with missiles and weapons, supplied by the United States. What I found kind of interesting is that during the speaker's visit, it took an opportunity. The retired Army Lieutenant General H.R. McMaster took the opportunity to say that the 19-hour visit this week to self-governing island Beijing fired these missiles over the waters and this demonstration of force. But all these escalating military moves from the People's Republic of China really signal to the world that Beijing could blockade or maybe invade China. We brought that point up last week, that the most probable military action was probably a blockade of some type or some destructive move to the ports, that wouldn't involve a full-scale invasion. What Masters kind of goes on to say here, but just kind of summarizing, is that the waters, and Jonty's talked about this in the past, that those waters are actually really tricky. There's very limited times of the year that you could actually have a seaborne invasion from, even though they're close proximity to each other, of China to Taiwan, and that the currents in the waters themselves are extremely difficult to navigate for, a surface landing force.
As they always are in a strait.
In a strait, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
A lot of current.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, 2 years ago, the current Taiwanese president, Chen Lang-wen, said that they've improved their defense spending budget up to 2.3% of GDP, which is actually pretty high. That's kind of meets above the plateau that the NATO treaty requires among the NATO nations, and that they've actually approved in the parliament a special $8.6 billion appropriation earlier this year to face the Chinese naval and air incursions over the winter. So I thought this really interesting that they've bulked up. They've obviously continued to on guns and butter. They're actually applying more of their economic might into the military, into the defensive measures. And of course, it'd be very difficult that projection of power with missiles and planes right over a flat area of water. You're a bit of former Navy man yourself, Michael. It's ship makes a formidable target out on the flat terrain for a missile.
They do, and they're starting to use these missiles. I think the Ukrainian people are using them against the Russian Navy.
That's right.
To
sunk several vessels.
Yeah.
Well, kind of in closing on this story, McMaster kind of goes on to summarize here that Taiwan actually has incredible will. And that's what we've seen with, the war of Ukraine and Russia, right? This will, the iron will of the Ukrainians. And that, he said, the will and the esprit de corps of the people of Taiwan is equally high. And that Japan has been the real source of strength in the region. In terms of the islands they control and their defensive military that they have, and the ability for us, as Billy, as you brought up many times, them like on Okinawa, facilitating, hosting our military presence within that region. McMaster compares the current situation to the 1930s. In the playbook that was used, by the Germans, that through authoritarian means are able to coerce away pieces of Europe.
Right.
And that's currently really what they're attempting to do now. They successfully done that with Taiwan. With Hong Kong, right? With other,
That's the typical behavior of a bully, is it not?
Exactly.
You push people around and
totalitarian government. Yeah.
You threaten them, and if you don't do as I say, by golly, I'm going to chop your head off.
Yeah. So just in closing, he was in favor of the high-level visit of the Speaker of the House, Pelosi, to Taiwan. I thought that was a productive move, and that Trump had opened the door to more of these high-level visits during his administration, because the Speaker actually hadn't been to any Speaker hadn't been to Taiwan for many years, since the 90s.
Right. In listening to you, David, I got to thinking, would it be difficult to blockade China?
It's a very big country.
Yeah, but it's not much.
It is,
but not many ports.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They have some.
How many active ports does China have? It's only about 4, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not many. It's like the United States. We've got a handful.
China is a landlocked country.
Yeah.
So very little coastline.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why they had to do now. They think they have money. They have to do everything in the South China Sea. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, you're right. It's not many ports.
So you could theoretically blockade them.
So the time, when they supporting Vietnam, and they wanted to have Vietnam or the ports.
Because of the port. Yeah,
Vietnam realized that, so they choose to under Russians' protection because they saw Chinese ambition. They said, "No way, I'm not going to give it to you."
Yeah.
So that's the real story.
So do you think that is the predominant thought in all countries around Southeast Asia right now? They all see what China's up to. Mm-hmm. They see what will happen to them if China takes over. And now
it's certainly the case of the Solomon Islands. They finally realized what was about to happen and reversed some of it.
In fact, Billy, that kind of played out the way you prescribed it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because look, if you're a student of how that works in the South Pacific, then you realize that there's only so many ways it can go, and once it goes the one way, you're really stuck.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and so they pulled to the Solomon Islands' credit, with some help from I think Australia and the United States, they sort of changed the narrative of how that was going to happen.
You know, I've also seen reports that some of the man-made islands that they've been building throughout the South China Sea have actually been sinking.
Yes,
Yeah.
I've
Now, I
read
don't know
that too.
If that's true.
No,
or
I
not.
read that. In
Yeah.
fact, they built a
Think-
runway on
yeah.
one of those islands, and the runway is submerged.
Yeah.
Seaplanes.
Seaplanes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they need a seaplane.
When the Japanese built, in the Micronesian islands, they would build these things called skogi ramps, and they were for seaplanes,
Flying boats. Yeah.
flying boats. Yeah, so when you go to Palau and you down where the docks are in Koror and Palau, there's all these giant cement. They look like boat launch ramps, and they're for the skogis, the planes to come
Yeah,
up.
those man-made islands all sinking. You know, they learn from Dubai. You know, those palm
Right.
islands all sinking.
Yeah, but you
all
have
the
to-
high-rise
You have
building
to build
there.
an island right, otherwise it'll sink.
Yeah.
Well, the soil compacts, right? It gets heavy with the
Well,
water.
and it gets full of water.
Yeah, exactly, Billy. Yeah.
So we're facing a situation in Southeast Asia where we have this giant China armed to the teeth and threatening as loud as it possibly can. And everybody's looking at it going, if I fall, probably everybody else is going to fall.
Well, you know, something just dawned on me, too, is that interesting prototype here. If you look at Little Vietnam, they've never had a peaceful relationship with China. In fact, they've still
No.
had
No,
border.
never.
They've
In
still, in fact,
history.
exactly. In fact, they've over time they've actually had some military, confrontations with them over the
yeah.
border, right? Because it's not well defined. And look how prosperous they are, right? Sitting right on China's porch, defiant of the CCP. Operating and governing with relationships to the West.
Well, look at the countries on either side of Vietnam. Same thing.
There you go, Billy.
Yeah, now lots of business,
Laos?
factories are moved to Vietnam.
Laos is
You
doing
see
very
more and
well.
more- yeah,
Yeah.
Laos,
Yeah.
And
Cambodia's coming back.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
But yeah, it's a very good point that you could theoretically sort of fight China's incursion by just sort of ignoring it.
Yeah.
That was our first half hour of news today. We have some interesting news. We're going to follow that up with a big segment next half hour. We're going to ask the question, who has the most legitimate claim to owning Taiwan?
You haven't given that idea up, have you?
Not gonna.
Oh, okay.
Not
Amy says
gonna.
she has the deed. So.
And yes, Amy has the deed. So who has the
Yeah.
deed?
Oh, wait a
Who
minute.
signed the
You,
deed?
you didn't leave it. You didn't leave it in a box that the IRS could come and break open, did you?
So that's going to be a very interesting segment. Who do you think has the best claim to owning Taiwan? Thank you for tuning in our first half hour. We're going to be right back after this break.
Satisfy your hunger with a fresh, prepared, twice-daily grab-and-go sushi you'll find waiting for you at Sushi Market Sprouts, 2 blocks from the beach at 300 7th Avenue in Santa Cruz. Fresh, delicious, and oh so good.
Hello, I'm Junko, and I look forward to serving you at the Sushi Market Sprouts.
Satisfy your hunger right now with the delicious ramen and sushi you'll find waiting for you at Kaito. Easy in and out location in the Capitola Mall food court. Special orders welcome. Fresh, delicious, and oh so good.
This is Koji. I'm looking forward to seeing you at my restaurant, Kaito.
Mow, dig, haul, lift. The versatile Kubota BX Series subcompact tractor does it all. Switching attachments is simple, and a smooth hydrostatic transmission makes for easy operation. The Kubota BX Series, the #1 selling subcompact tractor in the U.S. for over 10 years. Talk to your local Kubota dealer today to schedule a demo. Go to KubotaUSA.com for full disclaimer.
C&N Tractors in Watsonville and Paso Robles makes it so easy to get a Kubota. Give us your tough jobs.
You took a new job in Texas. No problem. Store your stuff at Anbar Self Storage and U-Haul. Easy off Highway 1 on Airport Boulevard by the airport. 24-hour security. Spring cleaning special. First month free. Store it. at Anbar Self Storage and U-Haul in Freedom. Clean it out, pack it up, and drive it right to your door at Anbar Self Storage and U-Haul. Easy off Highway 1 on Airport Boulevard by the airport. 24-hour security, 24/7 access. Spring cleaning special. First month free. Store it at Anbar Self Storage and U-Haul in Freedom.
Responsible for managing an estate or liquidating a business? Call Clark's. Hello, I'm Patty Clark of Clark's Auction Company. Clark's offers a complete range of estate services, from selling one item to a house full, and we advertise locally, nationally, and internationally. Clark's is trusted by individuals, attorneys, and executors. Remember, we do all the work so you don't have to. Call today and see how Clark's can help you. 831-706-8776 or clarksauctions.com.
Celebrate America. The first American flag made by Betsy Ross was made from cannabis. Celebrate the roots. Ben Franklin, George Washington, and Thomas Jefferson, all cannabis farmers. If you know your history, then you would know where you are coming from. Join me, Christopher Carr, Fridays 8 to 9 p.m. on KSCO. Listen to The Cannabis Connection, America's first and foremost cannabis talk radio.
欢迎大家再回到第2个小时的China Watch Radio program.
Yes.
Wow.
Welcome back.
Real
China Watch
Chinese.
Radio.
Actual
Not
Chinese.
just this fake stuff from Olsen, right?
Real deal.
Welcome back. This is China Watch Radio. We have Bill Graff. We don't have Jaunty Collier. You know what? He's surfing.
Should we tell? We'll go
He's
ahead.
surfing.
Okay.
Yeah.
His
my
friend,
wife, my wife once said, "Never hire a surfer."
Well, yeah, but he's been really reliable. The thing about Jaunty is he has a friend in town he hasn't seen for a very long
Like
time.
I said, never hire a surfer.
And
the surf's up,
they're
they're
out
gone.
surfing.
Yeah. David Welch with us, Amy Howe, Susan on the boards, and we're gonna
and our audience.
And our audience, of course.
You folks.
You know, the second hour we always devote to the audience. It's all yours, 831-479-1080 when we come back. But right now we're going to tackle, as best we can, a very difficult question, which is, who has the best claim to owning the island of Taiwan? So I'm going to start with Amy's help here and giving you like a little brief history of Taiwan, as best as I could snatch it from Wikipedia. So we start 3,000 years before Christ, over 5,000 years ago. First signs of agriculture on the island of Taiwan. So people have been there a long, long time. So who were they? Well, they were ancestors of Taiwan's current indigenous peoples, who were essentially people from Oceania, a collection of people that came in from all over. The indigenous people are called Formosans, Yuanjumins, and Gaoshans.
Gaoshan means a high mountain.
The high mountain. So it's kind of like the equivalent of our indigenous people, who are sometimes called Crows or Apaches or Comanches and so on.
Yaquis.
So that was who lived on Taiwan until about the 13th century. Then the Chinese started visiting from the mainland. And the established in the south let's see. This was in the Ming Dynasty, right?
Yeah, Ming Dynasty.
So way back in the Ming Dynasty. So in the north, the Spanish set up a settlement in the 1600s, and the Dutch settled in the south of Formosa. So we had these two foreign countries there, and China, I guess, was a foreign country as well when it gets right down to it.
When Dutch settled in the Indochina, so meanwhile the Formosa, the island, they were colonized.
They were colonized.
They colonized.
So we had, who was trying to colonize it? We had the Dutch, we had the Spanish, and we had the Chinese.
And eventually, didn't we also have the Japanese?
Well,
later,
yes. So that came in 1895 after the first China-Japanese War. So the first, and then Taiwan was ceded to the Empire of Japan.
Yeah.
Okay, so who owns it then? Legally, the Empire of Japan did. Why? Because they took it away from whoever happened to be there, and whoever happened to be there said, "Here's the deed. It's up to you." So that lasted until 1945. What happened in 1945? World War II ended.
Japanese defeated.
And what happened to the Empire of Japan? It got kicked out, right? So who took it over in 1945?
Douglas MacArthur.
No.
I'm
No.
sorry.
That's the
Kuomintang
government.
Yeah.
Yes. But they
So-
didn't flip it another
So
4 years.
who's the Kuomintang? It was the people who got kicked out of China by Chairman Mao and the Chinese Communist Party. So, but nobody gave the Kuomintang title for the island of Formosa, which is now, of course, Taiwan.
But remember, possession is 9/10.
Yes. So, but there's no formal
No.
ownership,
Recognition.
right? So
Correct.
it's like whoever can live in the house, it's their house.
So technically, at this point, the last person that actually held the deed was Japan.
Was Japan? That's
Yeah.
right. And so that's where we're at today. Now, of course, the People's Republic of China, represented by the Chinese Communist Party, says we own that island. And the Republic of China, which is populated by the remnants of the Kuomintang and others, they say, no, we own this island. Now, as you say, Billy, there's a certain precedent with whoever is sitting on it owns it.
We're
right?
standing
Possession.
on it.
Yeah, possession being
so
90 points. Go
Mr.
ahead.
Oz, I have a question for
Sure.
you. So between 1949, to the United Nations, except the mainland China, and before that, in that period, is Taiwan is a country, independent country,
Well,
or United Nations?
no, I do not know if the United Nations
I'm wondering,
recognize.
but I think they are
I don't believe
belong to. They're not recognized
They're
as
not
a country.
I don't think
Ever?
so. No.
Never did.
Actually,
That's a good
We
up
question.
to
Google
that
that.
point, we need Jonty to answer
Yeah.
this one. But up to that point, I believe Japan was in control of Taiwan.
Well, David has a computer. Maybe he can figure it out. So, wonder, did the United Nations ever recognize Taiwan?
I don't believe they
No,
still
they
recognize
haven't. In
it.
Never.
fact, I'm going to touch on that
Good.
in a minute.
All right. So there we have the situation where the Republic of China owns Taiwan by virtue of the fact that it's in possession of Taiwan. It doesn't have the deed to the house. So it's in
Set up a
essence,
government.
It's squatting on the land that nobody owns. The closest ownership to the land is the Empire of Japan.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that's a very interesting. Now we're in a very interesting place in the discussion. I guess this is where I take off on.
Billy's
okay.
up now. Billy's going
So-
to tell us about why
Is-
the PRC owns the.
Is Taiwan really part of China? Well, as we've been talking about, it depends on who you talk to and who you ask. Those who say yes have a political reality and 1 billion Chinese on their side. Over 1 billion.
1.4.
Those who say no, that it's not part of mainland China, have economic reality and a different view of history. So
Who wrote this article, by the way?
the article that I'm reading comes from the BBC, and it's one of their commentators who writes a column called Step by Step. Okay, so the People's Republic of China certainly thinks of Taiwan as being part of China. Beijing has threatened to invade the island if it ever declares independence. Now, I'm unclear about this particular part of the narrative because I don't think Taiwan's actually formally said We're Taiwan. We're the
I think Taiwan has said we own China.
yeah. I think that's exactly what they said.
Their government
It's the government
still
exile.
Well,
exists.
because Chiang Kai-shek, right?
Yeah.
Fled to Taiwan, and now they're all saying, no, you guys aren't. We're not part of you. You're part of us.
Yeah.
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 Because we don't
Was,
recognize the
yes.
CCP.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, this is why this becomes. So in full disclosure here, I had a pretty good argument going when I was reading. I had this set up in my head. Okay, I'm going to argue. This will be good. And I got about 3/4 of the way through it, and I went, the other side's got a good point too.
What was the apple that fell on your head?
Well, here's the part about Japan is what really turned me. Because technically, you're correct when you say the last person who actually had the king,
The deed.
the deed
is Japan.
Is Japan.
Yeah.
According to the theory, actually one of the president of Taiwan, Lee Teng-hui, and that's his theory. And then also lots of Taiwan people, they wanted to back to Japan, back to Formosa. Before that, I'm talking about...
Because they had a great relationship with
and
Japan.
also they was...
Also, think about, look where Taiwan is right now with all of its... there's a lot of good commerce going on there. And look at Japan. Japan's the number 3 economy in the world right now. If you put those two together, holy smokes.
Powerful,
right? Mm-hmm. So...
And then, interesting that I will talk about who are Taiwan people. So before 1949, they have lots of people, because they call province of the Fujian. It's part of Taiwan. So lots of people from Fujian migrate to Taiwan.
That's right.
So those people, and they was in Formosa at that time, in the Japanese. So they wanted to back to Japan. And now the people from 1949 migrate from mainland, nationalists. They don't. Of course, So that's what I'll talk about later, that's who are Taiwan people,
Wow.
So anyway, where it really started to fall apart, the relationships...
Well, this is the argument you're trying to make.
Yes.
And you're telling us it's falling apart in your hands?
No, here's where it fell apart for the argument for Taiwan being on it is when Chiang Kai-shek died in 1975. He passed away. And he was their big leader.
Sure.
He had it,
Also dictatorship.
Well,
He was
absolutely.
a dictator, exactly right.
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely. Well, but
And
China,
then what happened?
Well, then what happened was the KMT began to slowly but surely move away from the grand designs of retaking the mainland and just trying to hold on to Taiwan, Formosa.
And have a political reform.
Right. And then, of course, their economy exploded and they became democratic.
Once they ended the dictatorship, they
that's right.
established a democracy.
And they became basically a shining example of how we could possibly do it.
Well, their GDP took off like a hockey stick up to the right.
Yeah, exactly. So,
of course, under American protection, otherwise never.
Well,
have peace.
and Japan too.
Yeah.
Japan's
That's right.
they're friendly with Japan, and and Japan's right there.
Yeah,
that's right.
So
financial support.
So this is why I said that as I was formulating my great argument to for on the point of view.
But you haven't told us why China thinks it owns Taiwan. What reason does China give for owning Taiwan?
Well, because they think that the government that went to Taiwan was a faction that was
throw over.
Yeah, that they were
defeated them.
Yeah, they were not part of the original emperor. They were a rival faction that went to Taiwan.
Yeah, they didn't view it as a government exile.
Right, government in exile is what they call it.
Yeah.
But why would that grant China legal right to the deed of Taiwan?
Because it wants it.
Because it wants it. There you go. See, this is why
I want it because it's mine because I want it.
Well,
that what
my argument? Look,
but they're confusing one issue. It's a population in Taiwan. It's like probably a majority is Han nationality because they migrate from mainland China.
Right.
So they say, oh, we all Chinese. So everywhere you have a majority Chinese should be China.
Yeah, but
that kind of seems too confusing.
Well, then they
People
take over
thinking.
Singapore and Malaysia too.
Yeah,
well,
that's
yeah,
what I'm talking about.
but if you're going to utilize that kind of thinking, then you also have to realize that other countries in the world have had a similar situation going on where, Portuguese in Macau.
It's kind of sounds like South Africa.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yes.
That was the next example I was going to use.
In China, you have more Kentucky chicken, so that means they're supposed to belong to Kentucky.
Boy, they eat that stuff by the pound.
Right?
Amy, I was sitting in the office, and it comes lunchtime, and I said, "What are we going to do about lunch?" She says, "Well, we're going to sell one of the gals out to get KFC." And she comes back, this little gal, she weighs about 95 pounds, and she's got like 20 bags of deep-fried KFC chicken sandwiches smothered mayonnaise. And everybody ate like 3-4 of those things. There's all these wiry little people in the office were eating 2, 3, 4 fried chicken sandwiches. I had half, and I couldn't do it.
Okay, so the argument for China holding the deed to Taiwan
has a lot of holes in it.
Is simply we want it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
we're big and powerful, and Taiwan's close, and if you guys don't follow along, we're basically going to take it away from you.
Well, it's like New Jersey. It's like, hey, we want it. What are you going to do about it?
There you go.
All right.
There you go. All right, David.
Yeah, well,
you're here to defend the Republic
I'm here to represent
of China.
Yeah, so I'm going to pretend I'm Taiwanese, and
you're going to defend a country that's not recognized by the United Nations.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Well, I'm going to recognize it on my United Nation. I'm United Nation of one. So there's a pair of political movements that are in Taiwan that are just as a backdrop of this that are good just to be sensitive of. There's the pro-green, which are for full independence, and there's another movement which is probably pan-green, and there's pan-blue, which is in favor of a peaceful reunification with the PRC, with mainland China. Now, they both, I think, have the same kind of economic and some similar types of goals of independence, but one obviously is a standalone nation as opposed to a powerful state, I think, part of a nation, right? So, if we kind of wind the clock back a little bit, Michael, this is going to really dovetail into what you were talking about on your timeline of the history of China. If you go back to, it was 1871 or so, there was a treaty with Japan. It was a trade treaty where they, realized the people of Taiwan Formosa would have a relationship with Japan. Japan later established another treaty, the 1895, the Treaty of Somoninsk, which really set the foundation for the relationship between the countries and the independence of Taiwan. Of course, at that point, the Japanese invaded Taiwan, and of course, there's an argument that this treaty recognizing Taiwan actually isn't valid because once the Japanese invaded, they wound up abrogating their own treaty. That's one of the counterpoints to this. But probably technically no. There was so we go off through the whole war period, right? The Japanese World War II, the first half of the 20th century. This is from the late 1800s now, right? Through the first half of the 1900s. We've got Japan, ruling Taiwan through the war years, and then we get to the post-war years in 46, into 45, you get into 46, and it starts to become a little more nebulous, right? So you still have the official recognized government is the Chiang Kai-shek government, the People's Republic, not the People's Republic of China, but the ROC, right? The Republic of China, which is now engaged in a civil war with the PRC. So we know how that ended, right? Chiang Kai-shek, of course, fled to Taiwan. There was a treaty post-war. It was called the Treaty of San Francisco in 1951.
Yep.
And that was a treaty where the warring parties, they had an acknowledgement that this wasn't an independent country. However, Taiwan and China didn't participate, or China didn't participate. What we call today is China, the People's Republic of China. So in theory, that treaty, though it was agreed, was never kind of fully signed by all impacted parties.
You don't have an agreement if somebody doesn't agree.
Exactly. And sometimes you don't. Sometimes you do have a world governing forums, through the UN and things where they just say, look, okay, we're not going to get 100% alignment, but, powerful countries, we're going to get an enormous alignment, and then that's going to be the de facto moving forward from an operational standpoint. So as we kind of move through the the post-war era and period, following this treaty with San Francisco and after the second Sino-Japanese War, ended in 1945. The PRC kind of dismisses this self-governing period. There's a couple of conventions. I won't go into the details for the audience. I won't want to bore them by drilling too deeply into this. But China looks at this as a conspiracy against the sovereignty of China. So their position is that, hey, the world might have aligned on this, and this may be Taiwan's intended and stated direction as a people and as a country, but we just think it's all a manipulation. And therefore, we're not going to buy into it. We actually think it's part of our territory. So it kind of looks at what Billy was saying, which is they want it, but they can't really show any clear deed or ownership, to the island.
Any reason why? Yeah. What's the reason they want it? Because they want it.
Well, strategic is why they want it.
Well, there's many, there's many reasons.
You can control trade because of the straits and a bunch of other stuff going on there.
What is the precedent?
Yeah.
For them,
you got to have a precedent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where's the deed?
It's like when the Supreme Court makes a decision on something in the United States, they go for legal precedent. What happened before? What did we decide before? What's the common, decision?
So as we look at this situation, who has the best claim to own Taiwan?
Well, if you're in so I spent a lot of time in Taiwan, and when you talk to people who are indigenous Taiwanese, because there's a lot of Chinese, but there's also a lot of people who are native, what they identify as native Taiwanese. In fact, there's a lot of native Taiwanese restaurants. They have their own food.
Formosans?
Yes.
Yeah, and the Gaoshan, are visiting in the mountains, but they only have about 4% of population now.
Yeah, it's kind of like what Michael was talking about earlier. The American Indians,
they become like a tourist attraction.
Yeah, sure.
You
it's
go
like
there, they show you the
Aborigines in Australia, same kind of thing.
Their clothes, their food, everything, But they are not the Taiwan independent people. They want a Taiwan independent as the Fujian people before 1949.
They probably just want to be left alone.
They want to,
leave us alone.
They always those islanders I was talking about, they want a happy life.
Yeah.
They don't care. Just don't bother them. Let them do what they want to do.
Exactly.
You know that.
Yeah.
Well, now, isn't that the essence of what China doesn't want for anybody?
Independence.
Independent.
Well, they want complete control.
They want complete control.
Yeah.
Well, in fact, we kind of, as we're starting to close on this, the Taiwan position, as China's proffered, as we discussed earlier in the program, the two systems, one country, and that's been fairly resoundingly rejected within Taiwan itself. In fact, the current
they saw what happened in Hong Kong.
Exactly, and in fact, the Prime Minister of Taiwan has stated, I think she tweeted this out, "We stand with all freedom-loving people of Hong Kong." This is during the Hong Kong takeover. In their faces, we see the longing for freedom, and reminded that #Taiwan, hard-earned democracy must be guarded and renewed by every generation. As long as I am president, quote, one country, two systems will never be an option. In January of 2020.
Mm-hmm. Because it really can't be an option.
So if I can just
it did not work in Hong Kong, and they're the shining example of how China's going to try to make it happen.
And it didn't take them long to make it not
23 years.
Yeah.
They lost.
Problem is 50 years.
Yeah.
23 years.
So we tie these two pieces together. We had
never got back.
We had decades of independence and then decades of Japanese by treaty. An invention force, owning and taking care of, owning the island essentially. Then there's the post-war era. Really, it was a Japanese island until 1951, until the Treaty of San Francisco. So if we look at that, we also have the Taiwanese people themselves declaring and stating their intentions and what they want to do, as represented through their elected leaders, indicating that, no, we are an independent country and we do want to stand on our own.
And we want to be a democracy because we are one.
Yes.
So what right does China claim to Taiwan other than the fact that they want it?
I've stated my case. I think
Can anybody see a reason that China should be the rightful owner of Taiwan? Other than, they have the biggest guns?
Yeah.
Well, they don't have the biggest guns. That's my point. They actually don't have the biggest guns because Taiwan is protected
Do you
by
think-
Japan,
Yeah.
the last rightful owner, and by the United States.
Yeah,
Do you
I
think
look
if we
at
called
the,
Xi Jinping, he'd answer the question?
Yeah.
Why do
No.
you own China? Why do you own Taiwan? Well, give us a reason. Maybe if we called the Chinese embassy and asked them.
Well, and let's loop back to about a month ago on the program where we were discussing, the current policy position of the United States, which is, recognizing one China, but only if the countries agree that there is one China. And we still stand on that principle.
Same system. Look at the unification, model unification, like Germany.
Unification
Because
is
they don't
unification.
want to go back communist. They all wanted to have a democracy, right?
Exactly.
So no problem. What about Korea?
No, see,
This is
Korea won't work either.
That's right. They won't work.
Yep.
Well, it's like
They
you got
wanted
the
to be
dictator
unified.
up
They
north
really
that-
wanted to. Same race, same history,
Same
culture,
language, same everything.
Yeah, and also lots of family divided by two. But why they cannot? Because two totally different
Well, and
systems.
also-
They don't want to choose good one.
Well, also, though,
So?
but the probably bigger factor of that, I think, is that China will not permit a United States-facing democracy-friendly United States sitting on their border in the north.
There you go.
Yeah.
Or in the South Pacific,
Or in the South Pacific.
which is their lake. They claimed it. Why? Because they want it.
Yeah.
There's
But-
no other reason.
Well, first of all,
There is no other reason that we can see. Now, maybe somebody can help us out and tell us what right China has.
well, we're going to give folks about a 6-minute respite
Brief break to
ponder
to
it.
think
and-
about
go to Google and ask why does China own
why Xi Jinping want Taiwan? Was Taiwan?
It's very, but when you
Google
go,
will answer you. I
when you go
guess.
back and look at the history of this island off the coast of China and between China and Japan, and you look at the history and you look at all the people who've been there and come and gone, and all the influences. The only people that really
China was never there.
No.
Except for a brief period during the Ming.
During the Ming Dynasty.
Yeah. during the Ming.
Just very short.
Yeah.
Very
General.
short.
I just
and
saw one
Japan had it
statue.
for quite a while.
That was got from the Dutch. They kicked out
That's
the Dutch.
right.
That's it. And then, after that, Japan was there for a long time.
Well, that's our first hour. Listen, we invite you to hang on through the news break. Susan will bring us up to date on some traffic and some weather and stuff after the national news folks bring us up to date on what's happening around the world. And come on back for hour number 2 of China Watch Radio. We'll take your telephone calls at 479-1080, 479-1080. We'll be right back on KSCO Santa Cruz.
That the roadways are looking fairly reasonable so far. Weather forecast for tonight, mostly clear with lows in the mid-50s, north-northwest wind 5 to 10 miles per hour, becoming light and variable in the evening. Tomorrow, sunny with calm wind becoming west 5 to 8 miles per hour in the afternoon. And the boaters forecast today, west winds 10 to 15 knots, increasing to 15 to 25 knots, gusts up to 35 knots right now, wind waves 4 to 5 feet. Tonight, very similar, gust up to 30 knots, though, instead of 35. And tomorrow, west winds 20 to 25 knots, gusts up to 30 knots, wind waves 3 to 4 feet. Swell south around 2 feet at 18 seconds. There is a small craft advisory that just went into effect, and it stays that way through this evening. There will be another one tomorrow afternoon through tomorrow evening. The time now, 6 minutes after 3 p.m., and that means it's time for the second hour of China Watch Radio.
China Watch Radio is brought to you in part by Sushi Market Sprouts on 7th in Santa Cruz and Kaito in the Capitola Mall Food Court. Treat yourself to the finest Japanese cuisine you'll find anywhere with fresh sushi to go and delicious ramen dinners. Sushi Market Sprouts and Kaito. Yum!
欢迎听众们回来第二个小时。
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is the second half of the China Watch Radio, special edition of the China Watch Radio. Who owns Taiwan? Now, the CCP says it owns Taiwan, but why does the CCP say it owns Taiwan? Well, does anybody have any idea? Love to hear what you have to think. The Republic of China says it owns Taiwan. Why? Because it's sitting on it and has been since 1945. And possession being 90% of the law, maybe they have a point, but what do you think? The phone numbers today, 831-479-1080.
Well, the last legal owner on paper was Japan.
So we have with us
that
today,
argument too.
running the boards, Susan Simon on the control room here in broadcast studio. with
Wait,
Billy.
you think I'm in control of this?
Yes, you're in control. All you have to do is hit the button and we're gone.
That's
Billy
true.
Graff and then David Welch is with us, and the world famous Amy Howe, of course, is back raising the roof today, and Michael Olson, yours truly. So let's kick it off, Billy.
So, well, what do you want to do? You want to take phone calls?
Yes, I want to hear once again why China thinks it owns Taiwan.
Did you Google that question?
Yes.
What's the answer?
I couldn't find
Did
the real.
anybody out there Google?
Look, I was a little kid. I had a 14-month younger brother. And when I wanted the Tonka truck,
You took
he
the
was
Tonka-
littler than me. I just took the Tonka truck. Well, I think that's kind of what's going on in China. They want the Tonka truck.
Now, that's an interesting perception, probably closer to the truth than anything else. We want it because we want it, and that's why we deserve it. But is that the kind of world that we now live in? Or has the
Well, wait a minute
has it
now.
ever changed?
Well, wait a minute now. If you're going to ask that question, I can point to the big thing in the news every night now, Ukraine and Russia. Russia said to Ukraine, we want the Tonka truck.
Is the China-Taiwan question any different than the Russia-Ukraine question? Just big bullies picking on little neighbors? Is that what's going on in our world?
Well, we can point out to a lot of situations where, kind of that's the truth.
Kind of.
Wow.
Yeah, well, I remember if you go back to my high school history class, the teacher said there's three ways that you grow a country. You either discover new land that's unsettled, you take it at the end of a gun, or you purchase it or negotiate it in a treaty.
There you go.
And there aren't a lot of options.
Three ways. So it appears as though China has figured out how to grow its country. And Russia as well.
Yeah.
And I have been making the point that I think Russia and China are in league in taking their little neighbors.
Well, in fact, H.R. McMaster, the former national security director under Trump, right, has said exactly the same thing. There's an axis that's very similar to the 1930s.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, history is rife with examples of how this is done. And not to pick on, one of our good neighbor friends, but the British Empire, there's a reason why they call it the British Empire. For a while there, they used to say the sun never set on the British Empire.
That's right.
So, Billy, do we have a phone number today?
479-1080, 479-1080. We have a phone number, but right now, at the moment, we don't have any lines because they're all loaded up.
So
I guess we better get to
open
work.
up.
Phones.
I got to move this thing closer so I can read it because the bifocal no longer works. Let's see, who's been on long enough? That would be That would be Bill and Salinas. Let's go to line 3.
Is
Bill,
this
you're
Captain
on
Bill?
China Watch Radio.
Captain Bill.
Is this Captain Bill?
Okay. Yeah, that's right. Okay. When I listened to you guys in the first hour, it seemed to me your discussion had to do with like who lived on Taiwan, Formosa, and that type of thing. You were looking at it from the perspective of just the island.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you missed the boat. You should be looking at it from the perspective of the global approach to Taiwan.
Mm.
Let me mention, like after World War I, the great powers who won the war decided what countries were going to exist. They broke up the Austro-Hungarian Empire. They broke up the Turkish Empire. They did, they created countries. They eliminated countries, and that's the way it was. So if you use that kind of perspective, you look at when the Chinese had their civil war going on, Taiwan was part of China. It had been given to China at the end of World War II by the great powers, at these conferences like in Tehran and Casablanca and that, where Churchill and Roosevelt and Stalin sat down and drew up what the map of the world was going to look like. And Taiwan was part of China. Nobody argued about that then. It was all run by Chiang Kai-shek. But as the Civil War progressed and Chiang Kai-shek started to lose, he retreated to Taiwan, right? Okay, still part of that one China, but now one government on Taiwan, one part of it on the mainland. But then the United Nations took away the recognition of Chiang Kai-shek, and they recognized Communist China as being the China. Taiwan was not a part of, was an independent country, wasn't recognized by the UN, wasn't recognized by the United States or anybody else. It was, everybody thought it part of China, and the legitimate government of China were the communists, whether we like them or not. So my conclusion is that Taiwan is part of China today, and it's that way because of what happened at the end of World War II and the recognition by the UN. So that's my perspective.
But maybe just it's a good perspective. It's a good contribution. Maybe a counterpoint to that, though, maybe would be this Treaty of San Francisco of 1951, where there was a lot of ambiguity as to, because Japan technically still had, if you quote unquote, we're using American real estate terms, but title to the island really until that point in time. And of course, by then, Chiang Kai-shek had fled, from the Civil War onto Formosa.
So just
why do you say that the Japanese still had title? That was taken away from them because they were the losers. They lost in World War II, and they didn't have a voice. The great powers at that time said Taiwan is now part of China, and that's the way it was.
Yeah.
So, do the great powers in the form of the United Nations have the authority to bestow nations upon nations?
Yeah. See, I even though
they do.
Well, some people think they do.
Is there a legal precedent for that, or is that just
Israel?
Yeah, Israel would be a good example, I guess, right?
Yeah,
and there are a lot of people who dispute that.
The Palestinians,
Yeah.
they were promised stuff by the United Nations and they didn't get it.
So, Captain Bill, I brought up something that, as long as we have you on here, I'd love to ask you. Do you think it would be possible to, we're talking about China, surrounding Taiwan and bottling it up. Would it be possible for Taiwan to bottle up China?
No. No, I mean, the mainland China is so much larger, and the military is so much larger. I can't imagine that being the case. If you're talking about, realities, I just don't see that at all.
Yeah, just a dumb, naive question from a dumb Montana boy. But I'm just wondering how many really significant ports.
Yeah, I was going to say, is there any way to blockade it?
Yeah.
You being the
Taiwan
captain.
No, China.
Taiwan only has 5 ports that are capable of handling containers. They're pretty easy to bottle those up.
No, I was talking about mainland China. Could Taiwan block all of China's ports and blockade them?
Well, what would they bottle them up with? Their little tiny navy? No way. So they're not even remotely equal in terms of military power. No.
And I think, too, what the United States has sold and other Western countries have sold to Taiwan are weapons that were defensive. They had, like, for example, I think on the F-16s they don't even have extended range tanks on them. They can basically barely get to the beach in China, and then they run out of gas. They have to turn around and come back. So there isn't any offensive capability, really, that we've sold to Taiwan.
So it's all defense.
So,
yeah.
Bill, I have a question for you. So I agree with you. As legally, actually, Japanese, I don't think they have any because they defeated World War II, right?
Yeah,
So they don't have a right to claim Taiwan or any territory they used to occupy.
No, I think we all agree
during
on
the
that.
war, right? So
Yeah,
I
we all
agree with
agree
that.
on
We all agree on that.
Yeah, but for reality, that many years, Taiwan grew up, become an entity, independent entity. Doesn't matter. You could call Taiwan as an orphan or whatever, right? They say American dumped them as of China in the United Nations, whatever, from that moment.
You're
and
talking
they
about
become an
modern
orphan.
reality.
Modern reality, but they are the independent entity. Also, they have a good system and not just opposite of China. So what do you think? You think Taiwan, for Taiwan's sake, for this entity, doesn't matter the history, how they grow, how they born, whatever it is, and it's better off to belong to China, belong to mainland China, or remain independent?
Well, Taiwan never was really independent. It was part of Japan until they lost. It was taken away from them, returned to China, and the part of China. And everybody recognized that after the aftermath of World War II.
But that was in
Taiwan
history.
was not.
But recently,
Bill, since 1949, Taiwan has basically operated as its own country.
Yeah.
Well, they've operated independently. Nobody recognizes them as a country, right?
So
Doesn't matter.
I have a question, and maybe Bill, if you know. I always wondered when they chased Chiang Kai-shek off the mainland onto Formosa, at that time in 46, 47, right? It was on 47, right? Wouldn't it have been easier just to pursue him at that point and just crush him off? And I'm wondering why they stopped.
You mean CCP? They had to first. They had to get a mainland. They wasn't get mainland. In 1949, they took a power.
Chasing.
Before that, there's no way to do it.
Right, but they chased Chiang Kai-shek onto Formosa, right?
Yeah.
I'm wondering at that point why
they just didn't
follow. You mean all the way?
Why did they finish him off?
Because in Chinese say, I think we're talking about Chinese program, so we should know the Chinese strategy. You're chasing the dog to the corner.
Yes.
What's happened? So at least Mao is kind of smart on that point. He's a good strategist.
Yeah, he didn't want to chase the dog into the corner and get bit.
And Bill, what were you going to say?
You don't want that happen.
There were two reasons why.
Bill, go ahead.
There were two reasons why the communists did not go after Chiang Kai-shek. One was a practical reason, in the sense that they didn't have the Chinese communists did not have a navy or any sufficient ability to transport an amphibious operation across the Taiwanese Straits. And the other was the fact that the U.S. Navy ruled the Western Pacific. We were the policemen we had aircraft carriers and ships going up and down the Taiwanese Strait. We kept the Chinese communists away from Taiwan for a long time. We can't do that anymore. We no longer have the power to do that. That was a long time ago. So, but anyway, that's the reason why they didn't pursue him.
Well, that makes sense, Bill.
Do you think, Bill, that the world community will be able to maintain the law of the seas as we go forward?
That's kind of like might makes right, doesn't it? I think that there's going to be problems with that in the future as China continues to want to lay claim to, like, the South China Sea as their territorial waters or the straits. Difficult how they can. We so-called challenge them by having a ship run into those waters every now and then. But I'm not sure what would happen if the Chinese really laid down the law and said that this is our, we're going to sink any ship that comes into these waters. That could be. Let's hope they don't do that.
Yes.
Which is kind of what they did in the recent exercises around Taiwan.
Well,
These are
recently,
live
remember the Navy ship
these are
recently
live
went
fire
through
zones.
there.
These
They
are
made a
live
big-
fire zones. Nobody is allowed to come in here.
And yet
because
the
we're
United States
shooting.
Navy sent one through
Yeah.
while they were doing it.
Captain Bill, always good to talk with you.
Yes.
Okay, guys, I enjoy your show.
Thank you for calling.
From now on, you're Captain Bill.
Yep. Our Captain Bill.
Our Captain
All
Bill.
right, let's go to Stephen Capitola. You're on China Watch Radio.
Hey guys, I just wanted to compliment you on a show you had about 3 weeks ago when you thoroughly reviewed the January 6th interruption at the White House. That was so well thought out and full of information. I just thought it was very professional. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for the compliment.
Yeah.
We appreciate you listening.
Okay, now moving right on to our current topic, I want to discuss peace through nukes. And I don't like the concept of might makes right, a bully just taking what they want, like we're seeing in the Ukraine, and now it's being repeated in Taiwan. Now, I trust the Taiwanese people. I just have an instinctive trust of those people and their ability to control their arms if needed. What about placing a high evolution advanced nuclear weapon on Taiwan aimed at Beijing, and just let them say, listen, you're not welcome here, and this is the line we're drawing. Is that a possibility?
Well, let me ask you this: what happened to the Ukraine?
Yeah,
exactly.
They didn't have nukes though.
Well, they did.
They do.
And then
They did.
Russia signed a treaty with the West saying, well, we will mutually protect Ukraine if you give up your nukes. And so they gave away the land-based nukes back to Russia.
And now we have the situation we have.
Yeah. They're supporting what you're saying, actually.
Yep.
Yeah, I didn't really know those details, but that looks like it was a bad tactical decision.
Occasionally happens in world politics.
I think it was a bad strategic decision as well. When it gets right down to it.
I was
Occasionally happens in world politics.
With Taiwan, the way it's set up now, I mean, this is just talk. I'm just, I'm a nobody, but it feels like the right thing to do is for us to back Taiwan's move on this and just say, listen, these people have a right to freedom and their own way of life, democracy, and they've chosen it. And we're going to back their play and mean it. I don't know. I mean, that's just my gut on that.
You know what I'd be really curious is, and again, this is just interesting. If you could somehow magically dip into the playbooks for Taiwan, the United States, Japan, and China, like. What are the playbook? What are the contingency plans? Like, what's really the go-to
Well, I
thing?
think we got an inkling of that when Mrs. Pelosi went to Taiwan and when the current president was asked point blank, would we defend Taiwan? And he said, yeah, we will.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know anything like you. I'm a lay person on this. I haven't seen any of the big advanced playbooks on all this stuff, but you got an inkling of how the current United States government feels about this, because we sent the third in command over there to say, hi, how you doing?
In high heels.
And when the president was asked a direct question, he gave a direct answer.
Yeah, it was refreshing. I actually liked Pelosi's answers as well when that follow-up when she was back home. I'm just kind of paraphrasing when she said something of effect of, no country, particularly China, is going to tell us where we're going to travel, who we're going to visit, and the diplomacy, right, we're going to extend. It's like I thought it was really refreshing to just push back and say no.
And we haven't been doing that since Trump.
No, that was refreshing to be candid.
What's that, Steve?
For the midterm, that she had to do that.
There you
for
go.
the
She's running for president.
show, yes.
Steve, what?
I really like Pelosi's response to that, and I just wanted to add, I think if you're gonna stand up to China, you better not be bluffing, because I got a feeling they could make it all business real fast.
I think that's true. I think that they're I'm trying to think of the other way, but I think you're absolutely correct. I think that when we put an intention forward, it had better be a serious intention, and need to follow through. No, we need to follow through, right? Because look at the bluff and bluster that comes from China on things like when all the warnings of dire consequences if Pelosi were to go to Taiwan, right?
Can I just make the observation I've made several times on this program in the past? Yeah. When the United States gets pushed into the corner, we can really bite big.
That's true.
We're still the big dog. Yeah. I don't care what anybody says. Yeah. And I'll tell you what, if we prove that when somebody bombed Pearl Harbor, we prove that when, on a whole lot of instances.
Wait a minute, Billy.
That's 1941.
Yeah, that's.
You don't think right now if somebody bombed San Francisco, they would not turn into a cinder block in about 5 minutes?
They're not going to bomb San Francisco, Billy. It isn't going to be the way they do it.
No.
It isn't going to happen that way.
No.
And with respect to...
Well, I got news for you. It's close in the South Pacific. When China wants to build a giant port in the Solomon Islands, I think
Taiwan is not Pearl Harbor.
Well, but Mao Zedong, when he threatened, when he told Khrushchev that he was actually going to use nuclear weapons, because the Russians, after the war, right, the Russians were helping the Chinese make a reactor that would go critical so they could do their scientific research towards a bomb. And, when Mao told Khrushchev that, we can afford to lose the population, the other guys can't. The Russians came in and started feeding him false data to keep the reactor from going critical. What we didn't realize at the time is that there were actually multiple sets of spies out of the Manhattan program. And one of them was this guy named Fuchs, who went undiscovered for years until later on, who was also a devout communist, went back into China and corrected the data so they could make the reactor go critical. But at that point, they had kind of sobered up a little bit on the practicality of the bombs.
Well, is there any chance of is that way out of the question of giving them a defensive weapon like that?
Well, the question is, do they have one already?
Well, also, if we gave them a defensive weapon like that and word got out somehow, somebody leaked it, you don't think China would be really upset about that? I mean, that might provoke a war.
I think China is always going to be
already
upset.
Exactly.
They're already upset.
Also, they're more bluffing than anybody else.
Yeah. They're bluffing now. It's interesting to note as they become bigger and bigger and bigger and become more approximate to us, how they become more aggressively bully.
Yes.
And so if they do become more powerful than us, you can expect that they're going to use their big stick to beat the holy living bleep out of just about everybody they can. So it seems to be incumbent upon us that we must put on our competitive hats again and quit giving everything we have to China.
Right.
As we have for the last 30 years.
I don't think anybody listening to this program disagrees with that thought.
But Michael, I think what's going to happen is China is just going to it's going to be like a big octopus, like on a James Bond novel. They're just going to keep reaching out and expanding until they get a tentacle cut off.
Well, if I could just add, when you're dealing with a communist government or any government that's centrally controlled, they look and appear like an implacable foe because they have one message from corner to edge that they push forward with. And some of it's bluff, some of it's backed up with some reality. You've always talked about, Michael, Sun Tzu. You keep bringing that up quite a bit on the program, and how Chinese masterfully use that playbook from psychological, confrontation to beat their foes.
All the way up and down the food chain, yes.
Exactly.
From just how they think to how they act. Sun Tzu,
I think if you were a general, if you were the chief of staff, I mean, you're head of the armed forces of the United States, and you're head of the armed forces of China, and you trade places, I think both of them would be really astonished with who really has what.
There you go.
Yeah,
Billy, got a great...
Well, listen, Steve, thank you for the call and great questions. Really great call. Thank you for...
Hey, thanks, guys. Great show. Awesome show. Bye-bye.
All right, let's take our break, our half-hour break here.
Do we have anybody waiting to talk on the phone?
We have 4 people waiting to talk, so we're going to get to all. We promise we'll get to all your calls after we come back from paying a little bill.
831-479-1080.
Hungry with a fresh, prepared, twice daily grab-and-go sushi you'll find waiting for you at Sushi Market Sprouts, 2 blocks from the beach at 300 7th Avenue in Santa Cruz. Fresh, delicious, and oh so good.
Hello, I'm Junko.
And now, a special message from KSCO owner Michael Zwirling.
Dear KSCO audience, it's time to share with you some KSCO issues involving the local government dating back to pre-COVID 2019 that will soon be coming to a head. The best case end scenario is that KSCO and the County of Santa Cruz will be reasonable with each other and work things out. The worst case end scenario is that the county will use its authority to punish KSCO financially to the extent that it is no longer feasible to operate. In a nutshell, here's the story. Back in 2015, we installed our party patio to use as a special, unique venue for station and community events, some of which some of you may have attended over the years. We built a beautiful concrete patio, walkway around the building, and wall seats without obtaining permits from the county planning department because I did not believe a permit was required. Even the concrete contractor said no permits were necessary. But apparently we were both wrong because of the proximity to the lagoon. They call it a, quote, riparian corridor, unquote. Different rules apply. Long story short, the county has busted us and insisted we obtain permits after the fact, which is okay. The problem is, I very foolishly signed a legal document called a stipulation and order in which I agreed to do certain things, like getting a survey done by a licensed professional surveyor by certain dates. It was basically a blank check to the county obligating me to, going forward, pay for any and all staff time that the county chooses to assess. Stupid of me, I know, but the deed is done. I am at the county's mercy. The $2,500 survey concluded that I was in fact in compliance with the law, and I considered the matter closed. County planners, however, did not agree with the surveyor's findings and rejected his report. They require that I saw cut, jackhammer, and haul away an enormous amount of concrete patio and walkway because they say they would never have issued a permit for concrete that close to the lagoon. I believe this is not only wasteful, it is stupid, unreasonable, incredibly expensive, and not to mention harmful to the environment. I've reached out to Supervisor Koenig, who represents KSCO's district, to help obtain a waiver or exception to the riparian rule so that a beautiful public asset does not have to be destroyed. Supervisor Koenig seemed quite understanding and supportive, given KSCO's long history of serving as an incredibly valuable lifeline for the community during earthquakes, floods, power outages, and other local disasters and emergencies. Let's hope he and at least 2 other county supervisors will work with us to make this happen. I will end with this thought. Can you imagine what a local disaster would be like without KSCO? Don't count on the internet or any other media. For KSCO, I'm Michael Zwirling. Woman with a lighter. Hello, everyone.
欢迎
Welcome to the second half of the second hour of China Watch Radio. Today, the subject, who owns China? Captain Bill was pretty unequivocal, was he not?
Yeah.
Well, of course China owns Taiwan. Of course they do. And I'm sure that's what Xi Jinping would say as well.
Can I get a Fannie Mae loan on that? I'd buy it if I could.
Yeah, good
Be an
luck to
awfully
that.
big loan.
Yeah.
So we have 4 callers, and we're so excited to hear what they have to say. Billy?
Well, the guy who's been hanging on the longest is Colonel Terry. So
the world famous Colonel Terry.
Colonel Terry, welcome.
Welcome.
欢迎欢迎
Esther, look, I have the answer and I have the solution to Billy's question 2 hours ago.
Good.
Which one? What was the question 2 hours ago?
It was before the show. He knows what's going on before it happens.
Who has ownership of Taiwan?
Oh, okay.
Primary question, how do we get there? First of all, call it, ladies and gentlemen, what it is, communist red China. Seriously, that's how you should phrase and identify it. It's communist red China, distinctive from nationalist China on Taiwan or Chinese people elsewhere. And call it Taiwan. That's what it is. An independent island of Taiwan. It belongs, in fact,
the answer. To the 23 million people who live and reside there. That's who it belongs to. And they can proof of that is tracing their ethnic and demographic identity back thousands of years there. Next.
Some of them can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the proportions are
4.5% of the people can trace their lineage way back. Yeah.
And I've met them when I was there too. They're
48% in 2008 and 2020 were identified as Taiwanese.
What was your percentage again, Colonel Terry? Say again.
Well, in 2008, it was 48%, according to what's on ethnic populations of Taiwan. And then in 2016, it was 58% identified themselves as Taiwanese. 3.4% as Chinese, and 34% as both. Blended. So there we are, 89+% identified themselves as Taiwanese.
But what about the United Nations and what they want?
What's your question?
Yeah, the United Nations, as Captain Bill said, gave Taiwan to Communist China.
Yeah, well, that was wrong because it ignored the preferences of the Taiwanese. And Biden and company should have the spine and backbone to do the right thing for the 23 million Taiwanese, 89% of whom identify in whole or in part as Taiwanese. Okay, and the Chinese that are there are also part of the Taiwanese population, population of residents. The solution is we declare Taiwan, like we should have said for Hong Kong, can have a plebiscite, as I've suggested before. And the United Nations will conduct it, and it will be recognized and honored. And you put it on living video, all those people going to the polls and saying, I vote to stay independent of China.
Let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question, though, if you're going to do that.
Let me finish the solution. So there is the solution. Biden and the West, the Japanese and others, get behind the right to respect self-determination of the people that live there. And that we will, and the United Nations, we manipulate, lobby, whatever, to do the right thing and recognize the justice in that. So it's my justice initiative to respect the rights of the people who live on Taiwan.
Okay, you made your point, but let me ask you the big question. If you're going to use the United Nations as the deciding body and run the
Security Council?
And who's on the Security Council? Remember, all members of the Security Council, any one member can destroy the vote and stop it. And one of the members is China.
Also, in reality, they bought lots of votes.
Yep.
Then you point out
from lots of African
they
countries.
captured
So what you're saying, in theory, would work
Cash
great,
play.
but in reality, ain't going to fly.
reality will work that we declare we will respect the vote counted by the Taiwanese, whether it's the United Nations or anything else.
But we've never done that in regard to the United Nations. We always follow the rules.
Let me finish the sentence, Bill. Regardless of what the United Nations concludes, and we point out, yes, the Chinese are wrongfully, unjustly inflicting that vote in the Security Council. We will not recognize it because we recognize greater justice.
So
There's my total thought.
Yeah. So Colonel Terry,
have we ever done that?
Yes, we have.
When?
If we have we ever recognized justice and the vote of people?
So Colonel Terry,
Try the American Revolution and voting. The Continental Congress, of which I have an ancestor who participated, declared in the Declaration of Independence. There we are.
Yeah. So Colonel Terry, I hear what you're saying.
Nationally elsewhere. So
Colonel Terry, if I hear what you're saying, you're suggesting that we stand on our principles, our American principles of right of self-determination, and that if they vote to be independent as a country in Taiwan, that we should recognize that, even if it's unilaterally, where we should certainly bring, allies with us, certainly maybe across our allies across the Pacific Rim, to also then to recognize the output of that plebiscite. That we basically ignore the UN, but we actually rest back on our own governing principles.
We also respect the word justice in the modern world, and that was just. And we also encourage the people in Hong Kong to have a vote, and we press for that diplomatically.
So why we lost?
Once again, though, I asked the question. You're talking about something that we did not do, Terry.
Fine, we can rectify that.
Terry, I have a question
Biden can
for
have
you.
a spine to rectify that.
It isn't going to happen.
I'm giving you a solution. Whether Biden's got the balls to do it is something else again.
Yeah.
So,
But do it. We could make it an ongoing point of propaganda, of public relations, of international relations to counter China's expansion.
so, Colonel, may I ask you a question?
Please.
In reality, in Taiwan, the mainland China, they already infiltrated lots of things. And lots of people being brainwashed by their propagandas.
Mm-hmm.
As I know, because the last time I visited is before the COVID 2018. And I talked to lots of people. I can't believe it, how many Chinese flag, those, what I call the Chinese, CCP's flag, all over the place. I was shocked because I said, this is Taiwan. They're not occupied yet, right? And then talk to people, and lots of people. I think they infiltrate. They send a lot of people there.
That's
and brainwash in the school, everywhere. I can't believe it.
Yeah, Amy has often said that if there were such a vote, it would probably go to China, to Red China.
They probably say they wanted to be part of China.
But that was before COVID.
Yeah.
And that was before we've seen China's no COVID policy, which I do believe
what governance
is
would
the
look
wet
like.
dream of socialist everywhere.
Absolute control.
Yes.
Absolute control.
Thank you, Colonel Terry.
Changing a lot.
Thanks for the call, Colonel Terry. I think he's right. I think let him vote.
Yeah.
See what happens.
I don't disagree with that
Ain't
either.
gonna
I'm
do
just
any
saying
good,
that you have to be real about how the United States operates in the United Nations and other things. The United Nations, any member of the Security Council can quash whatever they say.
So if I could circle back to our core topic here real quick. Colonel Terry brought up Hong Kong. Hong Kong was
gone.
a property of China. That was never in dispute, right? The British had a 99-year lease from China to use the land.
Mm-hmm.
That was always part of mainland China. There was no doubt about it. There is ambiguity over who has dominant rights to Taiwan.
I think so.
And by the way, there is one. Since you brought up Hong Kong for just a moment. I don't understand something about Hong Kong. When China took it over 23 years ahead of time and killed
that time they promised 50 years.
That's what
at
I'm
least.
saying. That's what I'm saying. They 25 years ahead of time, they took it back and destroyed
Are
the
you
agreement.
suggesting that the CCP does not respect the rule of law?
I'm doing more than.
Oh, Billy, I'm shocked.
Wait, I'm doing more than suggesting that. And here's my big question: how come the Great Britain did not say, "Wait a minute, this is the agreement we had. Get the hell back to the mainland and leave Hong Kong alone for another 40 years."
I'm sure they did, but so what?
The Queen
Too
of
late.
England died. Didn't hear her say anything.
Yeah.
Point no return.
They didn't say anything.
Who's on deck?
Let's see, 34 minutes. That's probably Dan in Pacific Grove. We should probably take him next. That's
Dan the man?
Dan.
4.
Dan the man
One,
in
two,
Pacific
three,
Grove.
4.
Hey, Dan.
Hey, Dan.
Good afternoon, everybody. Great discussion. So there is a country called Republic of China. Stamped in my passport several times.
I have that in mind too. Good point.
And if you come into Kaohsiung Harbor on a container ship, as I have quite a bit, big sign right at the entrance says "Welcome to the Republic of China." Now, didn't the Republic of China government commence about 1912?
Yes, there was the after the last dynasty there was the formation of the Republic of China,
So-
right, which is the government in exile in
So
Taiwan.
that's even before the United Nations gave it away.
Yeah.
Now, there was a mention of ambiguity, which exists in many parts of law, both domestic and international law, including some ambiguity and disagreements on standards of statehood. But the commonly accepted source presently is called the declaratory method of statehood, which is stated in the Montevideo Convention of 1933, which does not require recognition of a country to exist, although the Republic of China is recognized by about a dozen countries, 13, I think, include one of them being the Vatican. Although statehood is not that is not a determinant of statehood, but there are different schools of thought. But the prevailing standard is the Montevideo Convention.
So I almost brought that up in the Taiwan argument, the Montevideo Convention. I didn't, just to keep things at a higher level. But you're correct. I think the only party who's not recognizing that in this case is the communist Red China.
Well, there's the United States does not recognize the Republic of China as a country, which we call Taiwan.
But the efficacy of the Montevideo Convention.
Well, Dan makes a good point, though. Your passport.
There's another question. Maybe somebody could. It would be interesting. Well, it's my theory, which is there was the Republic of China goes back to 1912. There was a civil war, and one could say the winner, the side that wound up with the most territory, is the People's Republic of China. Is it correct or not correct to state that the Republic of China moved to Taiwan and continues, which would make the People's Republic of China the breakaway province?
Right. There was never a peace treaty at the end of that civil war. There was never a reconciliation. Just the fighting had stopped, and people drew lines on the map.
De facto, or one would say de jure, I think, recognition of two separate countries there.
I'm agreeing with you. Interesting point. What Dan is saying is that the legitimate government of China was that of the Kuomintang. The Kuomintang moved to Taiwan
and set up a government.
And is still the legitimate government of China.
He makes an even better point with his passport. When he says his passport is stamped by the Republic of China, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
The passport is the recognition of the United States government of a person's citizenship. When a country stamps it and you've entered that country, the United States recognizes that country as having let you in as a citizen of the United States.
That's right.
Therefore, they're recognizing that country.
And the Republic of China meets the test of
the criteria
under the Montevideo Convention, and additionally is recognized by about a dozen countries as a nation.
That's a very good point you brought up.
So I prefer to refer to that island of Taiwan as the Republic of China. There are smaller countries, by the way. It's one more thing I'll just touch on. This proposal that the United Nations exercise authority it does not have to declare who is a country, I don't think that would ever fly, because for one reason, I don't believe it's in their charter. If nobody else, if the big countries didn't push back, the small ones would. There are 47 mostly smaller countries that just shot that WHO treaty to pieces. Shot it down. And they would shoot it down because what independent nation wants to hand over to a foreign organization the ability to declare that they don't exist? And those smaller countries would, I think, quite reasonably view this as a neo-colonial cabal. I would, actually.
Very good point.
Well, Dan, listen, you have won the right to call whenever you want.
Yeah, you made some very good points.
We'll probably bump you to the top of the line.
I like these subjects. Pleasure speaking with you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks a lot.
And lady.
All right, let's bring David on from Santa Cruz. David's been hanging on a while. Hello, David.
Hi, how are you guys doing?
Hey.
A couple of things. I'm not sure when one of you alluded earlier to the notion that we're much stronger than the CCP in terms of being ultimately able to impose our will by force. I'm not sure if that's true. They have a totalitarian regime. They can unify the masses behind a military movement much more easily than you could in this country, because in a democracy like what we have, for example, there are differences of opinion, and there won't be unity, just like there's rarely unity in point of view of opposition to any country unless it's outright war. especially something that's on the order of an invasion of American territory. But I don't think, you know, if you want to compare cultures, I'm not so sure that we can reference, for instance, the culture of World War II, where we defeated totalitarian powers, because we were a different culture then. We were a much more resolute and focused group of people than we are today.
After Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
After Pearl Harbor, yes.
You know, Dave,
before Pearl Harbor, no.
Yeah. You know, Dave, I would mention that, in fact, I would go back to look at the CCPs that during the Shanghai lockdown we reported on, where there was the drone with the loudspeaker flying overhead. Remember what it said, right? I mean, we have...
What did they say?
Well, it's interesting. It says, cease your soul's yearning to be free, right? And stop singing on your balcony, right? There actually was like shrieking and screaming, right? But it was interesting. Our form of government, although it's not perfect, it is more ideally situated to kind of fly in formation with the human spirit, right? With freedom and independence. And Chinese people have that as much as we do. And even though they have a totalitarian government that tries to unify their thinking and their speech, they're still intelligent people that have a yearning and an understanding that there's probably something more different and better.
And look who we have living proof sitting right here with us today.
That's right.
Person who survived the camps, yes.
But that, of course, the Chinese people have that spirit in them, and they're fighting as well as they can in opposition to a criminal endeavor, which is the CCP.
Yes.
That being said, to presume that we, the American people, the American culture, are necessarily the strong ones, we haven't really succeeded in any military endeavor since World War II. We have lost every single military engagement that we've been a part of since World War II, and that's a devastating record on the part of what is the world's greatest superpower.
Well, if I could add that we've lost a few wars, but we almost always won the battles, right? We never, like, I go back to Colin Powell's presentation in terms of having overwhelming force, clarity of the American people, and a solid, rock-solid, clear objective, right? We've always missed that clear objective, which allows us to, we don't have a specific goal that we're trying to accomplish.
And yet, the Chinese, the CCP, does have a rock-solid goal and objective. And they have been following up that for the last 20 years by infiltrating the United States of America, capturing our elite, every one of them, from the top to the bottom. They have been fighting this war for 20 years.
Well, I'd like to respond to that. I'd like
please.
to respond to that very quickly, because the fact is if you want to find one single party who's responsible for the immense power of today's CCP, well, we can point the finger at ourselves. We created the monster. We made the monster as strong as it is. We decided we want to buy cheap stuff, and we're going to keep buying cheap stuff, and we're buying cheap stuff today.
I think the environmental effort to clean up the environment was a big part of our losing that war over industrialism to China. They came to us and said, we got to get rid of our dirty industry. And then they run down to the box store and buy made in China because it's cheap.
Right.
And that is a big part of that 20-year fight by the CCP against the United States of America.
Well, yeah, we're aware of it now. Enough time has gone by that we're aware of it, or we should be aware of it, and we could close trade if we wanted to with China. We've closed trade with other nations.
Look what happened to Donald Trump. Look what happened to Donald Trump when he tried to get a hold of it.
Yeah.
They came down on Trump with everything they had. The CCP.
Well, that was piecemeal action, and you need something much more broad based than that. And the fact of the matter is we still have a blockade against Cuba. So to say that we don't have the will to economically isolate another nation because of their record on human rights or their record on whatever it is that we're opposed to.
Yes.
We have that ability. We just choose not to do it because we want to buy cheap stuff.
Yeah,
we want to continue.
Are you going to tell Tim Cook that he can't do business with China? Tim Cook has a lot of juice.
He does.
in this
That's
country.
right.
A lot of people want cheap
And
iPhones.
it's not just Tim Cook.
Yeah.
There
Gotta
are a lot
have
of-
the iPhone, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, got it.
There are
Yes.
a lot of Americans
Lots
who are making a lot of money and do not want to be disturbed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm
Hey, listen.
reminded of David reminds me of was it Pogo's, like, I've met the enemy and he is us.
We have
Yeah.
David. We appreciate the call. Thank
Great
you for
call,
making your
David.
points.
You can call again, too.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
Take care.
Thanks, David.
All right, let's see if we can get Mark in before we end the program today. Mark, thanks for waiting.
Hey, Mark.
Hi, of course. Great call today. Really good show. So I just have a question, and it is this. How sure are we, 100% to 0, like on a scale of 1 to 100, that China really does want to invade Taiwan? They've had forever to do it. Is it more of a strategy to just keep us occupied with like being worried about it and not worrying about everything else going on?
Boy, that's a good question. That's a very good point.
Yeah.
You can call again, too.
Yeah, keep asking questions like that, yes.
And what really would they stand to gain by it? I mean,
Not
I
much,
don't know.
really.
No, we've talked, the other weeks we've discussed this where, a smoldering rock is really not much benefit to Taiwan, to China other than bragging rights. What they
Well,
realize the
that's
economic
big to
assets.
them. That's face.
Yeah, but if they can get the
That's-
if they can get the GDP and all the Western technology, plus the
they're getting their face though from all the bluster and threats and military exercises and everyone in the world talking about it 24/7. I would just be curious to know how many of the CCP upper echelon have their money in Taiwan, because China's not a great place for the States right now.
We had a banker on the show 2 weeks ago who was phenomenal, who talked about the wealthy. Said if you're not wealthy in China until your money is sitting in a Western bank.
There you go. Yeah.
That's true.
I think we have one
Great call. Thank you
Listen,
very much.
thank you for the call, Mark. We really appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Mark.
What a great
Thanks,
point.
guys.
So let me just, while we have some time here, to remind you, if you want to find out more about what we're talking about, the in-depth stuff, the all the articles we've read and what we were talking about, go to our website. It's really easy to remember. Even I can remember it. ChinaWatchRadio.com. And John T. posts all the articles we talk about.
What was that address again?
ChinaWatchRadio.com.
Just like the name of the show.
That's why I can remember
What
it,
a
actually.
coincidence. My goodness.
My goodness.
ChinaWatchRadio.com.
ChinaWatchRadio.com.
You know what else
Easy
you can do? You go to ChinaWatchRadio.com. You can sign up for the Insider newsletter. You get one email a week, and you're part of the team.
And not spam.
No spam. We'll never sell your address.
Well, okay.
At least not today.
Unless somebody wants to buy it.
Unless no, we're kidding, of course. Hey, Flight 1080s, we're completely out of time. It looks like there's all kinds of people going to be on Flight 1080 today.
再见，好同志们。
再见，再见，
Thank you, Amy, for joining us. We appreciated that today.
谢谢。
Go Taiwan.
This is KSCO Santa Cruz, Salinas, Monterey. Flight 1080's on the way. Hang on.